Okay, think about this for a second. What if the biggest threat to a secure facility isn't some crazy high-tech heist, but something as normal as a lunch break? Today, we're going to dive into something called the break paradox. It's a huge security flaw that hides in plain sight. And believe me, it tells us so much about how systems really fail.
Now that sounds completely backwards, right? A break is supposed to make a guard sharper, more alert, so how in the world can it also be the moment of greatest danger? Well, to really get it, we need to look at a real-world story where this exact paradox led to an absolute disaster. Let me tell you about the lunch break heist. It's a story about a simple 45-minute window of rest that ended up costing a company 12 million pesos. So, picture this. It's a rainy Tuesday. Officer Ben has been on his feet since 5 in the morning. He's working a grueling 12-hour shift, and he is wiped out. At 1 p.m., his reliever, Officer Carla, finally shows up. Ben is now officially off duty for 45 minutes. He can finally actually relax. And while Ben was on that well-deserved break, this is the amount in pesos that just walked right out the front gate. 12 million. So what happened? Well, a van rolls up to the gate with this incredibly sophisticated forged manifest. Officer Carla, who just took over the post, is the one to process it. She's still trying to get her bearings, get a feel for the situation, when this critical decision comes across her desk. The craziest part? The theft wasn't even discovered for another 6 hours. And here's the real kicker. Officer Ben did everything by the book. He took his scheduled, fully compliant break. And still, total disaster. And that, of course, leads to the $1 million, or I guess the 12 million peso question. Who's on the hook for this? Is it Carla, the new guard? Could it somehow still be Ben's fault? Or does the blame lie with the system itself? This is where a simple story gets really, really complicated. To really understand what went wrong, we need to zoom out from the story and look at the core concept that explains these situations. It's called the break paradox. So here's the bottom line. We need guards to rest. It's the only way they can stay sharp and focused. You just can't be hypervigilant for hours and hours on end. You're not a robot. But the very act of resting, of taking that break, creates a potential gap in the security. It's a real catch-22. You've got these two forces pulling in opposite directions. On one side, the job demands constant vigilance, this huge mental weight. And on the other, our human biology demands real, actual rest to recover from that weight. It's like walking on a razor's edge. And when the system doesn't balance these two things perfectly, guess who usually takes the fall? The guard. Now, to really pick this problem apart, the source material gives us this brilliant framework. It basically sorts every single kind of break a guard could take into 4 clear categories. Okay, first up, you've got category A. This is the ideal situation. You're properly relieved, you are fully off duty. Then there's category B, which is this really dangerous gray area where a guard is kinda on break, but also still kinda on duty. Next is category C, which covers the fatal mistakes, major violations by the guard themselves. And finally, you have category D, which points the finger directly at systemic failures from management. Getting this framework is the key to figuring out who's actually responsible. But here's where it gets really interesting. These categories don't just exist on their own. Nope. A failure in one often kicks off a problem in another, creating this domino effect, what the source calls a chain of failure. Let's walk through how that works. It almost always starts here, in category D, a management failure. So imagine a security agency that automatically docks an hour of pay for a lunch break, even if they never send a reliever and the guard has to eat at their post. This isn't just bad scheduling. The source straight up calls it wage theft. And it creates a completely toxic environment for the guard. So that category D failure directly forces the guard into a category B situation, that sketchy gray area. Now they're trying to scarf down a sandwich at their post, but they're still expected to monitor CCTV, answer phones, do everything. They're not getting a real break, which just leads to burnout and exhaustion over time. And this is the predictable and honestly tragic result. That exhausted guard who's been systematically denied proper rest eventually makes a category C fatal mistake. They fall asleep on post. It's the ultimate sin for a security guard, but was it inevitable? And that right there is the heart of the whole problem. We see a guard sleeping on duty and our first instinct is to call it a personal failure. But when you follow that chain of events we just talked about, from a D failure to a B situation to a C mistake, it starts to look a lot more like a systemic inevitability, a failure that was set in motion long before that guard ever closed their eyes.
All right, so with all this new info, let's circle back to our opening story, that 12 million peso heist, and let's ask our question again, but this time with a much, much sharper lens.
So, using our new framework, Officer Ben's break was technically a perfect Category A. He was properly relieved, totally off duty. But this just uncovers a deeper, hidden truth. The real vulnerability wasn't Ben's 45-minute break. It was the seconds-long turnover process just before it. The system had zero procedure to make sure the new guard, Carla, was fully briefed and up to speed before she took command. That left her totally vulnerable to that sophisticated forgery. The break was fine, the handover was broken. And this accountability matrix from the source material, man, it just lays it all out crystal clear. In a Category A situation, like our heist, the relieving guard is primarily accountable. In that gray area of B, accountability is shared. In C, it falls on the guard, and in D, it goes straight to the top, management and the CSO. It's not about finding one person to blame. It's about understanding the context of the situation. You know, the author of our source material, Melvyn Valenzuela, really hits the nail on the head with this one. And this doesn't just apply to a single guard's actions, but to the whole security system. An organization that cuts corners on breaks, that doesn't treat its people right, might look successful on the surface, but it's really just hiding a massive failure that's waiting to happen.
And that really just leaves us with one final thought to chew on. We love to measure security by its technology, right? By the number of cameras, the strength of the gates, the fancy alarms. But maybe the true measure of a system's strength is how it treats its most critical and its most human element.